Welcome. Tonight I will take you far, far back in time. In today's video, we will embark on a silent journey together to the Stone Age, humanity's most primitive yet profoundly defining era. If you're lying on a soft bed right now, wrapped in a warm blanket, during this narration you'll come to truly appreciate that comfort. Because in the world we'll talk about today, a blanket was a luxury, let alone a proper shelter. But before we begin, a small reminder. If you enjoy these calm, deep historical narrations, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Also, please share in the comments which Stone Age hardships you think would challenge you the most. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you want to support us, consider hitting the join button. Now, close your eyes, because we're starting at the dawn of time. The era before roads, writing, the wheel, even agriculture existed. Thousands of years ago, the earth was not like it is today. Forests stretched wide. The sky was darker. Nights were quieter and more frightening. Humans, vulnerable at their core, struggled to survive amidst nature. Can you imagine spending a winter without a home? For someone in the Stone Age, that wasn't just imagination, it was reality. Because what we call a home wasn't a standardized structure yet. People lived in caves or built temporary shelters from tree branches. There was no warm stove. If it rained, you got wet. Winds blew, shifting stones, and the cold bit deep into your bones. What about food? Today, when we're hungry, we reach for the fridge or our phone to order something. But in the Stone Age, hunger was a harsh reality, walking hand in hand with death. Hunting started at dawn, sometimes lasting days without a single catch. Gathering plants was risky because you never knew which berries were poisonous and which were safe. You had to trust what your mother or the elders in your tribe told you. One wrong step could be fatal. Nights were another test entirely. People would gather around the fire, listening to the sounds of the night. Wolf howls, footsteps in the distance, unknown animal cries. Falling asleep meant risking never waking up because there were no walls or alarms, only the darkness and its secrets. Clothes weren't like today's stitched garments. They were animal skins with holes made by stones. When wet, they let water through and the wind made you sick. There was no medicine either. A toothache could turn into days of pain. A small cut could weaken you drastically. Every day, people woke up facing new threats. Hunger, disease, wild animals, attacks from other tribes, or nature itself. Yet they survived. They stood firm, learned to carve stones, discovered fire, shared stories, and that is why we are here today. Tonight, I want to not only tell you why life was so hard back then, but also make you feel it. History isn't just in books. It lives in the nights people lived through. Without shelter, there is no survival. The chill of patience lingered between stones. The sky was gray, the trees silent, and the fog of night slowly spread over the earth. A small group of people lay curled up on cold stone, still not awake. No blankets covered them. No walls surrounded them, just cold stones, animal hides, and the whispering wind. If you had opened your eyes that morning, the first sound you'd hear was the deep howl of the wind through the branches and the smell of smoke from the last embers of last night's fire. Mornings in the Stone Age were silent, but that silence wasn't peace, it was absence. Waking up inside a home was a dream back then. There were no walls, no ceilings. You were born into the very heart of nature, subject to its mercy. Building shelter wasn't a luxury, it was survival. But these shelters weren't what we think of today. Sometimes just a cave, sometimes a few branches leaned together for shade. How well that shelter protected you depended entirely on luck. If the wind changed direction, your night could be soaked. If rain started, you had to be ready or you'd spend the night standing, because lying down meant getting sick. There was a young woman named Sarah, not yet 20 years old, but the lines on her face already spoke of someone much older. One night, she tried to sleep near the entrance of a cave with her children. The fire had gone out. The youngest child was shivering quietly, curled up in a corner. Sarah was awake because a mother in those conditions had no luxury of sleep. She listened closely, the speed of the wind, the smell of rain, the sounds of animals outside. The cave offered some protection, but it was a dark, damp, sometimes poisonous place to live. For those who couldn't find a cave, The only choice was to compete with nature. Branches, animal skins, stones. Everything was used, but none felt truly safe. Today, when you enter a house, you lock the door, have windows to keep the rain out, and heaters to warm you up. But back then, people hoped that the right positioning of a stone would shield them. Building shelter wasn't just physical work. It was a mental battle because every gust of wind brought the question, will it collapse tonight? Cold was the biggest enemy. It didn't just silence you, it paralyzed you. You curled your body tightly, holding your breath to keep warmth inside, while silently praying to whatever gods were believed in, hoping to see morning again. Because morning was always a victory. Without shelter, sleep was half a rest because one ear was always listening outside. Even the smallest sound could startle you. A rustling leaf, a snapping twig. Bears, wolves, snakes, they all roamed outside, and humans were trespassers on their land. That's why people slept together in groups. Someone's eyes had to stay open. This wasn't a rule, but an instinct. The materials for shelter were stones and wood, but the most important resource was time. Time was the most precious thing to a Stone Age human because when the sun set, work stopped. Night was the enemy. Daytime, although busy with hunting and gathering, was never quite enough. You might not finish your shelter before snow or a storm forced you to leave. Sometimes you had to abandon your shelter because water ran out, prey disappeared, or trees withered. Attachment to shelter was dangerous. People lived half-lives. Everything they made was temporary, nothing lasted forever. One of the hardest things in the Stone Age was feeling safe. There was no roof, no lock, no table, no chair, no window, just stones and bodies. And when those bodies cooled at night, the line between life and death grew thin. If you lived back then, shelter wouldn't be just comfort, it would be a miracle you had to recreate every night. That is why in the Stone Age, life was first tested through shelter. Without shelter, there was no life. No food if you were hungry, no warmth if you were cold. Today, when your kitchen is just a few steps away and a delayed meal causes mild discomfort, back then hunger was not just a feeling but a threat walking silently alongside every person. Hunger often didn't just affect one individual, it tested entire tribes at once. That morning, the sky was gray and still, the ground damp but not muddy. A few men from the tribe had left early to hunt, armed with stone-tipped spears, flint knives, and hope. They had not seen any large animals for 3 days, only a few lizards and some spoiled fruits that didn't feed anyone. Inside the forest, silence became even more pronounced. Birds stopped singing because animals sensed humans and kept their distance. Hunting was a matter of luck. Sometimes you'd walk for hours without a single sign. If you saw a deer but the wind shifted, your scent would be caught, and it would flee. Spears were carried in vain. Today was one of those days. The hunters' backs were sweaty, their stomachs empty, but hunger was more than physical. It gnawed at the mind. The weight of failing to feed their children rested heavily on their shoulders. When they returned, their faces said it all without words. Eyes downcast, women understood, children couldn't ask. That day there was no food. Maybe tomorrow wouldn't be any different. This was not just an empty stomach, it was the stone-hard state of despair. Women began digging around the soil, hoping to find roots. Some children searched the riverbanks for fish, though entering the cold water required courage. Often nothing was found. Hunger was a silent guest, always present but never speaking. When people were hungry, they spoke less. Eyes slowed, steps grew heavy. Sleep became shallow, a deep rest was impossible with an empty stomach. At night, hunger echoed in the bones. Some dreamed of food, warm meat, cooked fish, sweet fruits, but in the morning, there was only an empty stone plate and the ashes of a fire. Hunger won again. When prey was found, it felt like a festival in the tribe. But the meat wasn't eaten immediately. It was cut into small pieces. Dried in the sun, there was always the possibility of hunger returning tomorrow. Hunger began anew every day, and so did the struggle against it. The success of hunters didn't just fill stomachs. It meant surviving one more night. To live in the Stone Age was to constantly search, but most often, hunger was the victor. Water was another challenge. If the river was far away, survival became even harder. In the Stone Age, mornings always started early, sometimes before the sun rose because fetching water took time. The temperature or purity didn't matter. What mattered was simply having it. A tribe lucky enough to live near a river had an advantage, but often water sources were far from hunting grounds or settlements. When the river was distant, people had to walk long distances several times a day, carrying stone containers or leather bags made from animal hides. When water touched those bags, they became heavier, and some of it would leak. Every drop was precious, used for cooking or to moisten children's lips. No one knew if the water was clean. Animals drinking upstream might have left disease behind. Stagnant pools might have quietly contaminated it. Drinking that water sometimes resulted in stomach pains or worse, but there was no alternative. Microorganisms, unknown back then, caused illness that people only felt, never understood. Carrying water was mostly women's and children's task. Their bags would get soaked and heavy, but those few handfuls of water could boil a stew or ease a child's thirst. Dry seasons were the toughest. When the earth cracked and rivers dried up, people scraped riverbeds for moisture, held stones in their mouths to produce saliva, and prayed for rain. Rain was a blessing from the sky. People raised their hands and faces upward, waiting for the gift. Animal skins and stone bowls turned into water containers, catching every drop, because in the Stone Age, water was a precious gift, but no one knew when it would come. Cold and warmth were constant struggles. When night fell, the air shifted suddenly. The ground that had absorbed the sun's gentle heat by day turned into a biting chill. Wind whistled through branches and bounced off stones, creating a haunting hum. For Stone Age humans, this sound wasn't just nature, it was a warning. Cold was beginning. Fire was still a rare and precious resource. Often, sparks were made by striking stones together, rubbing dry grass carefully. But if the wind blew, those sparks could die instantly. Rain dampened dry grass, meaning no fire that night. No fire meant a cold body, numb hands, and restless sleep. Cold wasn't just outside, it seeped into caves and stone walls, chilling people to their bones. Their blankets were few animal skins, but wet skins were more harmful than helpful. On cold nights, the only defense was huddling together, sharing body heat silently. Sometimes there was fire, sometimes only its memory. Cold hit children hardest. Their small bodies couldn't hold warmth well. Mothers pressed their children close, breathing warmth into them. But without fire, this was often not enough. Snow was another silent threat, a white blanket that muffled sound but made breathing hard. Cold air inside shelters silenced everyone, as speaking would lose precious warmth. Time felt slow and endless. If someone woke in the middle of the night, their first instinct was to check the fire, to see if it still glowed. Keeping fire alive could save a family. A few burning branches made the difference between life and death. Sometimes there was no fire at all. Those nights were not just cold, they were silent tests. People would huddle closely, shivering and hoping morning would come. Without fire, the night was not just cold but also frighteningly quiet. When dawn finally broke, surviving the night was a small victory. But everyone knew the next night would demand another spark, another battle to keep warm. Fire was more than warmth and light. It was hope cutting through darkness. Creating fire wasn't like flicking a lighter today. It required skill, patience, and a bit of luck. People struck stones against each other, carefully teased dry grass into a small bundle, trying to catch a tiny spark and nurture it into a flame. Many attempts failed. Wind blew sparks out or moisture ruined dry materials. Hands would blister, stones would scrape skin raw, but they never gave up. Fire was a tribe's lifeline. It cooked food, kept predators away, and made stories and songs possible. The person who made fire was honored, for they held the tribe's survival in their hands. Fire wasn't just flame, it was a symbol of human determination. Night in the Stone Age was not the end of life. It just changed its form. During the day, the tribe was active, but at night, people withdrew into themselves, shadows blending together. But at this time, another life awakened. Under the moonlight, on the bare earth, deep in the forest, eyes would gleam: bears, wolves, jackals, snakes, the rulers of the night. Humans were the most vulnerable in this silence. Tribes never fully slept at night. There was always a watchful guardian. Sometimes, it was an old man whose eyesight had dimmed but whose ears could detect the lightest footsteps of a hunting wolf. Sometimes, a young child who had just lost their mother tried to stay awake for the first time. Whoever it was, someone kept watch all night because those who failed to do so might never see the dawn. Fire was the tribe's greatest defense against the night. Glowing embers cradled by dry wood provided not only warmth but safety. The glowing fire was not just heat. It was a beacon of security. Logs placed carefully among the embers provided not only warmth but a sense of protection. The light made eyes shine and bodies cast shadows. But the watcher's greatest duty was to notice when the fire dwindled. As the flame lessened, shadows grew larger and predators dared to approach. Keeping the fire alive was the guardian's most important task. The watcher often sat quietly, stirring the embers with a small stick, breathing gently to revive fading sparks. Every flicker could mean the difference between safety and danger. The night's most silent and difficult moments came at midnight. Nature fell completely silent, even the wind stopped. In this deep quiet, the smallest noise could mean a threat or just a branch playing with the wind. Understanding these sounds took instinct. Humans survived not by nature's teachings but through intuition and alertness. One such night, an old man named Torgon kept watch. His hands trembled, but his eyes remained sharp. Sitting by the fire, stirring the coals with a short stick, he listened closely. The sky was overcast. No moonlight brightened the dark. Shadows seemed larger and more terrifying in the firelight. The tribe's children slept deeply, unaware of the tension. Suddenly, Torgon heard a twig snap not far, not too close. Maybe a fox, maybe a wolf. He set down his stick and reached for stones. If needed, he would make noise. But Torgon was patient. He knew that waking the tribe unnecessarily would cause more harm than good. Minutes passed. Then, another sound, this time footsteps, spaced far apart. It was no fox. His sharp instincts told him that something was coming. He rekindled the fire with a few sparks, sending small flames upward. The sky was pitch dark, but Torgon's eyes had grown used to the night. He saw it. A large wolf, alone and cautious, moving just outside the fire's glow. The wolf didn't step into the light but sniffed the air. Torgon's instincts screamed danger, yet the fire kept the wolf at bay. After a tense moment, the wolf retreated into the darkness. Torgon never forgot that night. The tribe greeted him silently at dawn. No words were needed, everyone sensed something had happened. The night had been survived. Some nights brought attacks, not by animals but rival tribes. Yet, wild animals were often more unpredictable. Wolves came in packs, silent and deadly, while snakes could slither silently into shelters. Thus, the watcher had to guard both outside and inside. The breath of children, the cough of elders, every sound mattered. Night watches rotated. Nights were split into 3 parts and everyone took their turn. Some were naturally more alert. Young men saw night as a time to hunt and keep vigil. Women sacrificed sleep to protect their children. Everyone stayed awake for their own reasons, but all shared the knowledge. Every night was a battle. Sometimes, attacks came not from wild animals but from other tribes. These confrontations were sudden and brutal, with little warning. The threat of an enemy clan was as real as that of predators lurking in the shadows. The unpredictability of animals was terrifying. Wolves hunted in packs, moving silently, while snakes could creep unseen into the heart of a shelter. The watcher's role extended beyond guarding the camp's perimeter. They had to be vigilant inside as well. Every breath, every cough, every movement mattered. A fallen child's restless sleep or an elder's faint cough could signal danger or illness, and the watcher needed to be aware. Nights were divided into shifts, often 3 parts, so everyone took their turn. Some were naturally more alert. Young men saw the night as an opportunity to hunt or guard, while women sacrificed sleep to protect their children. Despite different reasons, all understood the same truth. The night was a silent battleground where survival depended on constant vigilance. Illness was another unseen enemy. Without doctors, medicine, or understanding of germs, sickness meant falling behind in the delicate balance with nature. When someone fell ill, it was as if they stepped one foot back into danger. Many diseases progressed without clear symptoms, and without treatment, the weak often didn't survive. A cough or cold was the beginning. If it worsened, elders and healers would turn to herbs, roots, and leaves, nature's remedies, but none guaranteed recovery. Some believed sickness was the wrath of spirits or gods. When a fever burned, or consciousness faded, people prayed and whispered to unseen powers. The sick were cared for by family members, wrapped in animal skins and kept warm. Their breaths watched over during long nights. Wounds were especially dangerous. Cuts couldn't be stitched. They were wrapped with cloth and prayed over. Infections spread silently, turning minor injuries into fatal ones. Children were most vulnerable. Teething, diarrhea, or breathing difficulties could easily lead to death. Mothers held their children close, fighting to protect them with whatever means they had. Life in the Stone Age was a constant test, a series of challenges from hunger, cold, danger, and sickness. Yet, despite the hardships, people adapted. They developed tools, learned to control fire, and shared stories around flames that warmed more than just their bodies. Each day was a battle, but also a chance for hope. Every night survived, every meal hunted, every wound healed was a victory. This is why history isn't just found in books. It lives in the hearts of those who came before us, their struggles, their fears, and their triumphs. So, as you lie comfortably now, wrapped in a soft blanket, remember the long journey humanity has traveled. The Stone Age was harsh and unforgiving, but it shaped the very essence of who we are today. The Stone Age wasn't just about survival. It was about connection to the earth, to each other, and to the mysteries of life. Communities were small but tightly knit. People depended on one another for protection, food, and warmth. They shared stories, songs, and knowledge that passed from generation to generation. The fire wasn't only a tool for survival. It was a gathering point, a symbol of unity. Around it, the tribe came together, sharing experiences and teaching the young. Though the world was vast and wild, humanity's spirit was resilient. Each dawn brought new challenges, but also new opportunities. This quiet strength, this perseverance, is the legacy of those who lived in caves, hunted with stones, and dreamed beneath open skies. Imagine waking up in a world without walls, without warmth, and without certainty. The Stone Age was exactly that, a time when every day was a fight against the elements and the unknown. Yet, it was also a time of discovery. Humans began to understand the rhythms of nature when animals migrated, which plants were safe to eat, and how to make tools sharper and more effective. These lessons were hard-won, passed down through experience and observation. Mistakes often meant injury or death, but they also led to knowledge. The world was a vast classroom, and survival depended on learning its language. Today, we benefit from the courage and resilience of those ancient people. Modern comforts, warm homes, abundant food, medicine are built on the foundation of countless struggles faced by our ancestors. Every step forward in human history was paved with moments of hardship, endurance, and hope. So when you close your eyes tonight, let your mind travel back to those early days. Feel the cold stone beneath you, hear the crackling fire, sense the watchful eyes in the dark. Remember that you carry the strength of generations within you. In the depths of the night, people would spend hours in silent prayer, not shedding tears, just watching. Because helplessness was something that settled deeply in a mother's eyes. When the elders fell ill, they became even quieter, fully aware of the cycle of life. Some would begin to prepare for their own death, offering advice to the younger ones. They would say, "If the fever rises too high, carry me outside," fearing the illness would spread. After all, disease wasn't just a threat to one body, it could infect the entire tribe. Contagious ailments were the most feared because the weakness of one could jeopardize many. Shelters were cramped and close. There was no concept of personal space or distance. Often, the sick were taken outside the cave, left alone in the cold. Not out of cruelty, but to protect others. That solitude was often the first step toward death, and very few ever returned. Within one tribe, there was an elderly woman named Sarah, whom everyone trusted for her knowledge of herbs and remedies. Yet even she would sometimes shake her head and say, "There is nothing we can do." Knowledge was limited, and nature often remained silent. Illnesses often appeared without a clear cause. An increase in flies during a rainy season, contaminated river water, or bacteria carried by hunted animals, all invisible but terrifying in their effects. People explained these as curses of unseen spirits. When spirits were angry, the body fell ill. Healing, therefore, wasn't just physical but spiritual. Ceremonies were held around fires. Shamans whispered prayers, yet some pleas went unheard. Sometimes, dawn would come, and a body would be missing. Death was a constant companion in the Stone Age. Some nights, the dawn revealed one less soul. Death in the Stone Age was common, no stranger to the people, yet illness carried a different weight. It crept silently, slowly dimming the eyes, chilling the body. This passage was witnessed with solemn respect, for death by disease was no honorable end like falling in battle, but rather losing the race against nature. The deceased were quietly buried beneath stones, and for days, conversations in the tribe softened. Nights grew more withdrawn. Being sick in the Stone Age was an uncertain weight. No healer existed, no prescriptions were written. Only hands, eyes, and hearts remained, bearing the heaviest burden: helplessness. Sometimes healing was found in a plant. Other times it was not. Still, people tried, for life itself was a battle, and in that battle the faintest spark of hope was all that could be grasped. The silent agony of birth was perhaps the deepest and loneliest trial. Today's sterile hospitals with expert hands, machines, and medicine were a world away from a dim cave corner where a body trembled beneath animal skins and eyes watched silently. No hygiene, no guarantees. Often the life-giver was as close to death as the newborn. As labor neared, silence fell over the tribe. Women sensed it first in the mother's walk, breath, and sleepless nights. Then, she would quietly withdraw to the shelter's edge, accompanied by a few elder women. Others kept their distance. Men were sent away, for birth was sacred and secret. The emergence of a new body from within another was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. There was no special birthing place in the shelter, just a corner with dry grass and a few clean hides. Some nights passed in silence, only to wake up missing a body come morning. Death in the Stone Age was no stranger, it was woven into the fabric of daily life. But death by illness was different. It approached quietly and slowly. First, the eyes darkened, then the body cooled. People watched this passage with respect, knowing this was not an honorable death like dying in battle, but a surrender in the endless race against nature. The deceased was quietly buried under stones, and afterward, the tribe would grow quieter, conversations less frequent, nights more withdrawn. Sickness in the Stone Age was a state of waiting, a limbo where remedies were unknown. Yet hands, eyes, and hearts worked tirelessly. There was no healer, no prescription, only the power of touch and the weight of helplessness. Sometimes healing came through a plant's secret. Other times it never came. But life was a struggle, and the faintest spark of hope was the greatest treasure. The silent pain of birth was the deepest test of all. Today's sterile hospitals and skilled hands did not exist. Instead, life began quietly in a cave corner, on animal skins, watched by silent eyes. There was no hygiene, no guarantee, and often the mother was as close to death as the newborn. As birth approached, the tribe fell silent. Women noticed the change first: the mother's gait, breath, sleepless nights. Then, one morning, the mother quietly withdrew to the shelter's edge, accompanied by one or two elder women. Others stayed away, and men were sent off. Birth was sacred, a secret, a fearful mystery. The emergence of one body from another evoked awe and anxiety alike. There was no prepared birthing place inside the shelter, just a corner with dry grass and a few clean hides. No one knew when labor would start. It could last for days. When contractions came, the mother surrendered silently to the pain. Screams were forbidden, they might attract wild animals. Lips bit down hard. Hands dug into the earth. The first births were the hardest. Young bodies were not ready, and fear appeared in their eyes with each contraction. The mother's breath grew short, sweat beaded her forehead, and her hands turned cold. Her gaze sometimes fixed on the ground, sometimes into empty space. Everything at once felt both endless and fleeting. When a baby was born, silence fell, as everyone awaited the first breath, the first cry. No one relaxed until that sound came. When it did, a small joy blossomed in the shelter. A new life had begun. But not every birth ended with that sound. Sometimes the baby lay still. Sometimes the mother lost too much blood. The earth around them darkened red. Hands couldn't reach fast enough. Cloths fell short. Knowledge failed. Birth was both the start of life and death's closest sibling. Many children grew up motherless in the Stone Age. Many mothers never saw their babies alive. This was accepted as nature's order. Lack of hygiene meant infections easily entered through wounds, unclean hands, or dirty water. These silent killers were not understood. It was only said, "She couldn't carry the birth." The earth took another body. A mother who survived birth was not hailed as a hero, but all looked at her with deeper respect. She had passed the greatest test and lived. Some mothers had many births. Others none survived. Some children died at birth. Some grew silently and were lost in battles years later. Regardless, birth was a solitary struggle, a silent, natural, and bloody truth. If told today, it might be called heroism. Back then, it was simply reality. After every birth, the tribe would enter a brief silence because everyone knew that miracle had once again raced against death. Sometimes it was unclear who won, but when morning came, the newborn was swaddled and the mother's head gently caressed. If she had survived, life carried on as if nothing had happened until the next birth. Without clothes, only skins and cold wind surrounded them. Cold was not just a season but a wall pressing down on people, a bone-chilling force. What today's jackets and sweaters do easily, back then was a battle for survival. Clothing was not a design but a lifeline, made from animal hides, dried and softened through smoke and laborious work. Hides were scraped, sun-dried, softened by chewing, pierced with bones or stones, and stitched with strings from animal intestines. Stitching was simply pulling a thread through a hole, but if done poorly, the wind would seep inside, and cold would bite through. Winter winds were merciless. Shelters made of stone and earth had many gaps, so people spent most of their day wrapped in their skins. At night, these skins were spread on beds or wrapped around bodies, but they never offered full protection. Wind found its way through exposed skin, wrists, neck, and between fingers. The worst battle was against dampness. Rain would soak hides, making them heavy, stiff, and freezing. Wet skins were a punishment, not clothing. Children were wrapped in small hides but often left with bare feet and hands, their toes constantly freezing. Mothers warmed their children's extremities with their own hands and body heat, but cold never truly left. Hides smelled after a while, especially when wet. The stench was ignored because survival meant accepting discomforts. The scent, flies, and hardness were the cost of living. At night, hides were shared. Not everyone had their own, so people huddled together, their body heat warming the skins. Sometimes one hide covered 3 people, but the cold always found someone who woke shivering. The one who pulled the skin close survived. The one who didn't, froze. Well-prepared hides were precious, even traded. The skill of the hunter and the leatherworker earned respect. Hides were made into hats, boots, and belts, not decorations but tools of survival. Each took days or weeks of work. Some tribes decorated hides with stones and bones, not for beauty but as identity markers. Recognizing a hide meant recognizing its owner's tribe or region. The thickest, strongest hides were most sought after because wind erased all decoration but warmth. Still, no matter how good the hide, the fight against cold was never fully won. Every night before sleep, people prayed for the cold not to be too harsh, for morning to come with everyone still alive. Freezing to death was silent, no one noticed. not even those nearby. Sometimes breath would simply slow, becoming shallow, and only then would it be understood. Another body left alone under the hide. Life without proper clothing was a battle, not a luxury. Animal skins were all they had, and the cold never forgot it slipped through cracks, under the door, through the seams, relentless and unforgiving. Living with cold meant not fighting it, but learning to live alongside it, delaying its grasp. Outdoors, storms spoke first. The sky darkened, clouds gathered, winds shifted, birds went silent, and trees whispered warnings. This was not peace but nature's last warning before the rain began. The first drops fell quietly, on leaves or stones, and with that, everyone knew how strong their shelter truly was. Stone and earth huts were rough and temporary, made with thick branches covered by animal skins and stuffed with dry grass. No doors or windows, only protection from cold, wind, and curious eyes. But when rain came, everything changed quickly. Skins stretched, grass leaked, water ran between stones, and inside and outside blurred. If the rain was light, people endured, wrapped in skins, guarding the fire and children. If heavy, the floor turned to mud, beds soaked, fires dimmed. Wetness was more than discomfort, it was deadly. Once soaked, clothing would not dry, and without fire, hope faded. Storms were worse. Rain and wind brought destruction, branches cracked, shelters collapsed, stones shifted, skins blew away, water flooded inside, turning everything to mud. Staying inside was often impossible. Going outside wasn't better. People huddled close for warmth. Children were kept between bodies, women covered elders, the strongest stayed outside. Protecting each other was survival. Hiding under trees was dangerous. Lightning was unknown, but the fear of falling trees was felt. Seeking shelter in caves, under rocks, or behind stone ledges offered fleeting hope. Water dripping through rocks soaked everything slowly, chilling bodies. Hands and feet went numb, eyes closed, and all they could do was wait. People spoke little during storms, nature's noise was enough. Thunder rumbled. A woman hid behind a stone, closed her eyes, and prayed for the storm to pass. Sometimes hours would go by, sometimes a whole night, and in the morning someone might wake missing. Children feared storms but learned silence. The most frightened often stayed the quietest. A little girl clung to her mother's skirt, sitting by the stone wall, eyes fixed on the ground without tears. Tears were useless. Everything was already wet. Shelters sometimes collapsed, forcing rebuilding. Mud and wet trees made work harder. Wet skins were useless and everyone grew tired. Still, someone would gather stones and would shelter meant night and night meant safety. Sometimes storms forced tribes to move. Land collapsed, paths closed, waters rose. Nature seemed to say, "You cannot live here," and people accepted quietly. Desperation was learned. Children slept on mothers' backs while belongings were carried. Men led with stones and sticks. Storms left scars that lasted, reminding of life's fragility. Wet clothes today dry in hours, but then wet meant sickness or death. Storms were never taken lightly. They were watched, respected, and waited out in silence. Morning sun dried skins, shelters were fixed, life resumed until the next storm. Life in the Stone Age was a constant battle against the elements. The cold was not just a season but a wall pressing down, chilling the bones. Clothing was a necessity, not a fashion statement. People wore animal skins and dried hides, but these were never perfect. Thin skins tore easily, thick ones were stiff and limited movement. The quality of clothing depended on the hunter's skill and the tanner's knowledge. The skins were not thrown on carelessly. They had to be prepared. Fur was either scraped off or left on, depending on need. The hides were sun-dried, smoked, or hardened with fire and smoke. Some people even chewed the leather to soften it before sewing. Sewing was a simple task of piercing holes with bones or stones and threading sinew or intestines through. Gaps in the clothing let cold air in, so sewing had to be tight and careful. The cold often crept in from the neck, wrists, knees, and other exposed parts, making these areas battlefields against frostbite. Shelters were made of stone and earth, covered with branches and skins. They had no doors or windows, only small openings to let smoke escape. When the rain came, water seeped in through every crack. People wrapped themselves in skins during the day and spread them on the ground at night. Wet skins lost their protective qualities quickly, becoming heavy and cold. Children were wrapped in small hides, but their feet and hands were often exposed. Mothers would warm their children with their own body heat, but the cold was relentless and returned each day. The smell of wet skins was strong. Skins could not be cleaned properly, so they absorbed the scent of animals and earth, mixing with the dampness to create a pungent odor. But no one minded. Survival came before comfort. During storms, the tribe huddled together for warmth. Children were placed in the middle, women covered the elders, and the strongest stood guard outside. Trees were risky shelters, as they could fall in the storm. Caves, rock ledges, and dense thickets provided temporary refuge. Water dripping from the rock walls soaked the ground and the people. Fingers and toes went numb, eyes grew heavy, and all there was to do was wait. People spoke little, for the storm's voice was loud enough. When the storm passed, some woke to find someone missing. It was a silent reminder of nature's power. After storms, the tribe often had to rebuild shelters. Muddy ground made it harder, and wet hides became useless. Yet, someone always gathered stones and wood to rebuild the fragile homes. Without shelter, night meant death. Sometimes, the tribe had to move when floods or landslides destroyed their homes. Paths became impassable, and water rose beyond their control. Nature was merciless, and the tribe accepted its decisions in silence. Living without proper clothing and shelter meant constant exposure to the harsh elements. Each day was a fight for warmth and safety. The cold invaded every moment, forcing people to cluster together, sharing body heat. Those who were weakest often found themselves at the center, protected by the stronger. The fabric of social life was woven through mutual care and protection. Survival depended on solidarity as much as skill. Those who failed to keep pace were left vulnerable, their fate often sealed by the unforgiving climate. Food was another challenge. Hunting and gathering were unpredictable. Sometimes the tribe feasted, other times hunger gnawed. Preserving food was a mystery yet to be fully mastered. Fresh kills had to be eaten quickly or risk spoiling. Dried meat and roots were the staples, but scarcity was a constant companion. Every meal was a gift from nature and the skill of the hunters. Sharing food was vital, as one weak link could endanger the whole group. Starvation and illness often walked hand in hand. Birth was both a miracle and a danger. There were no hospitals or doctors, only women with experience and instinct. When a woman went into labor, the tribe fell silent. Birth was a sacred secret, wrapped in fear and hope. There was no special place for delivery, just a quiet corner lined with grass and hides. Pain was endured in silence to avoid attracting predators or disturbing the tribe. The first cry of the newborn was a sign of victory, but not every child survived. Death was ever present, and not always from old age. Children were lost to infection and exposure. Mothers sometimes never saw their newborns survive. Funerals were simple. The body was buried under stones, and the tribe retreated into quiet reflection. Life and death were intertwined. Each birth was a victory over the constant threat of mortality. The tribe moved forward, bearing the scars of loss and the hope of new life. In the end, the Stone Age was a time of raw survival. People adapted, struggled, loved, and mourned. Their lives were shaped by the relentless forces of nature and the fragile bonds of community. Every day was a lesson in resilience, where even the smallest hope could mean the difference between life and death. People glanced silently at one another, asking without words, "How many are missing? How many have survived?" Another storm had passed, yet every storm left its mark on the hides they wore, on the edges of stones, in the looks exchanged between eyes. Most importantly, time until the next storm was uncertain, and no one felt truly safe. Crafting tools, shaping stone against stone, was the heartbeat of life in the Stone Age. You needed something, but nature was unwilling to give you had to take. There were no ready-made chisels, knives, or hammers. Everything had to be created from scratch. Even a simple blade, which today we'd buy from a store without a thought, required days of focus, effort, and patience back then. To accomplish any task, tools were essential: cutting meat, skinning game, tearing apart hides, building shelters, even preparing food. But no one made these tools for you. You had to extract and shape them from nature yourself. First, you needed to find the right stone. Not every stone would do. Hardness, brittleness, and sharpness defined whether a rock was suitable. Flint or similarly hard, smooth stones were prized. But finding these wasn't easy. A skilled stoneworker could spot the right rock from afar, while a novice might waste an entire day struggling with the wrong material. Everything began with striking two stones together, but this wasn't just a random hit. It was a calculated strike. The angle had to be precise. Too hard, and the stone shattered. Too soft, and it wouldn't shape. Careful, controlled hits at the right angle chipped away slowly. The first break was like a sword's birth, edges gradually forming. From a shapeless lump, sharpness emerged: a blade, a scraper. But this was just the beginning. If the stone was to be useful, it needed a handle. Handles could be made from tree bark, bone, or straight branches. Drilling holes into stone was nearly impossible, so binding was the answer. Dried animal sinew, fibers, or strips of hide tied tightly to secure the stone in place. If knots were loose, the tool failed. Thus, patience in binding was as vital as the stone itself. Success on the first try was rare. Many stones shattered or lost sharpness if overworked or misshapen. Yet every failure led to another attempt. There was no alternative. Without tools, you couldn't cut meat. Without cutting meat, food spoiled. Without scraping hides, you had no clothing. Tool making was more than skill, it was survival's cornerstone. Even after crafting, problems remained. Tools broke, dropped, cracked, dulled by use or wetness. They were temporary companions, saving your life one day, breaking in your hand the next. This meant you started fresh daily. Some mastered this art and earned respect within their tribes. Their scrapers tanned hides better. Their axes felled stronger branches. But mastery came through countless shattered stones, cut fingers, and worn hands. Even children played with stones, knocking one against another, learning silently. This knowledge passed without words, as stones spoke, a language only those who listened could understand. Stone tool shapes varied by region, some made pointed tips, others broad and flat. Each shaped by local needs. Hunters crafted spearheads, while others made scrapers. This harmony with nature showed how humans adapted. There was no luxury or decoration, just function. Yet, over time, some tools gained simple decorations, etched lines or patterns, perhaps for beauty or marking ownership. Each tool was a product of its maker's labor and identity. Breaking a tool wasn't just losing an object. It was breaking a rhythm. Hunting without tools meant returning empty-handed, and hunger followed. Each morning began with checking tools, tightening handles, replacing bindings. Because if a stone failed halfway, nature showed no mercy. Stone tool making demanded strength, patience, and instinct. Every strike needed precision. Every break required courage to start anew. To conquer nature, you first had to mirror it. As harsh as nature was, your hands had to be just as resolute. Poisonous plants and dangerous foods made nature a feast and a trap. Every leaf, root, mushroom, or fruit could save a day or end a life. Knowledge was scarce, trial and error frequent, and errors costly. Poisons often hid in colorful shells, sweet scents. Hunger clouded judgment, pushing people to take risks. Sometimes a fruit was unfamiliar, or someone else had eaten it, but outcomes were unknown. The Stone Age person was no scientist but a survival expert, daring to try to fill an empty belly. A fruit would be picked, rolled in the palm, bitten carefully if soft and odorless. Children sometimes ate without thought, and hours or minutes later the consequences appeared. Poisonous plants were sneaky symptoms delayed. Burning throat, nausea, shivers, vomiting, sweating the body's battle. Often strength wasn't enough. Unknown toxins overwhelmed systems. Tribes watched helplessly as sufferers writhed in pain or slipped away. Shamans tried to understand poisons, seeking antidotes, but some toxins had none. Plants spoke a silent language: color, smell, season, location, relation to others all mattered. Few mastered this knowledge, which passed from generation to generation but always incomplete. Some tribes had legends: don't eat the mushroom with red spots. Ancestor spirits will be angry. These tales were warnings, born of painful lessons. Fear often preceded knowledge. Children learned which leaves to avoid through tone and warning, not explanation. Some tasty foods were traps: pleasant at first, poisons delayed. A mushroom might satisfy hunger, then cause pain, fever, and death before dawn. So, many stuck to what they knew, eating the same roots and seeds year after year. New trials meant risking life. Animals also posed danger: some reptiles carried venom. Certain frogs harmed by touch. Stone Age humans observed animals carefully. If a deer ate a plant and grew weak, that plant was dangerous. But observation took time and focus luxuries seldom had. Poisoning was not only physical but social. If one tribe member got sick, trust in food faltered. If a root was misidentified, no one ate it next day. The tribe debated cautiously what was safe, needing leaders to speak first. When someone died from poison, knowledge died too. Some tribes recorded deaths like calendars: don't eat this seed in this season, or this fruit hurts after sunset. These warnings traveled through songs, stories, and rituals, emotions carrying lessons words could not. Poison stories became scary tales to prevent mistakes. A child might be told a frightening story so they'd avoid dangerous food. These stories left lasting impressions, keeping children safe through fear. Trying new food required bravery, especially in droughts or when game was scarce. Then risks were taken. Sometimes a woman tested a leaf, first a small bite, then more. If she survived, it was a victory. If not, the tribe never returned near that plant. Eating in the Stone Age was a gamble. Every bite carried knowledge and risk. This knowledge was never guaranteed. People watched nature closely. Color, smell, shape, and texture offered clues. Yet nature didn't follow human logic. Every day brought new dangers, new chances for fatal mistakes. Survival depended not only on hunting but on choosing the right plants, a choice often uncertain. Observation, intuition, and sometimes sheer luck determined fate. Poisonous plants were silent traps. Neither loud nor frightening, they waited, striking the careless with delayed, irreversible consequences. Injuries, cuts, even tiny scratches could mean death. Survival wasn't just about muscle, sharp tools, or agility. A small slip, a cut finger, scraped knee, a twisted ankle could disrupt everything. Simple wounds that today heal with a bandage could then prove fatal. Mornings began early with tasks: gathering wood, keeping fire alive, softening animal hides. Amid this, a tiny injury, a nick on the hand, a scratch on the knee seemed trivial at first. Maybe a little bleeding, a mild sting. The day went on, but the wound moved with the body. No one knew germs, but they sensed something was wrong when wounds swelled, turned purple, and hurt unbearably. Working, walking, and even sleeping became impossible. This was where real danger began. The body's reaction signaled a growing internal problem: inflammation, fever, pain, but no remedies like antibiotics or antiseptics existed. Leaves were crushed and applied. Animal skins wrapped wounds. Prayers said. Sometimes it helped, sometimes not. When ineffective, the wound deepened, spreading infection inside, and slowly extinguished the person's life. In the Stone Age, knowledge wasn't found in books or screens, but was hidden in silence and nature's signs. Every natural event was a mystery begging for explanation. Thunder, in particular, silenced everything. It was a sound that sent shivers through the tribe. Children jumped, women stared at the sky, and men strained to listen, sensing something powerful was unfolding. Thunder was believed to be the voices of spirits, the wrath of gods, or a massive creature beating its chest in the heavens. This unknown sound sparked early beliefs as humans sought to make sense of fear. Fear and faith walked hand in hand. To calm the stormy skies, people prayed silently, using only glances, breaths, and gestures. Shamans communicated with gods through fire smoke, hoping their messages would pacify the heavens. Some tribes carved stone totems, symbols of stability amid fleeting thunder, to find peace. Children learned early to fear thunder's deep, shaking voice, unlike a mother's soft whisper. This sound was a reminder of the powerful forces governing their fragile world. Over time, people noticed rain often followed thunder. This hum was a messenger. Though its meaning was unclear, sometimes rain brought life, sometimes destruction. After thunder, the tribe waited in quiet prayer, holding their breath. Some nights, the roaring was so loud no one could sleep. They sat by the fire, avoiding eye contact, believing silence helped lessen their fear. Shamans began to interpret the sounds. Distant thunder meant far-off anger. Continuous peals meant gods were battling. Animal appearances became signs. Seeing a fox meant danger was distant, but a snake or black bird meant disaster. Belief became a way to control fear. Naming dangers gave them meaning. Thunder wasn't just noise. It was a message that shaped rituals and prayers, bringing comfort through repetition. Most importantly, when thunder roared, no one was alone. The shared fear united the tribe, creating bonds. Even the farthest member felt close because everyone listened together. In the Stone Age, thunder was the voice of the unknown. Faith was humanity's response. That voice still echoes, stirring something deep inside us today. Childhood in the Stone Age was responsibility, not play. No swings, toys, or leisure. Life's rules started the moment eyes opened. Learning wasn't optional. Survival depended on it. A 5-year-old would rise with the dawn, feel the cold bite, and walk barefoot into the forest with a small basket, guided by their mother. Identifying edible plants or poisonous ones was critical, as one wrong choice endangered the whole tribe. Children learned by watching adults bending like women to search for herbs, throwing stones like men to track animals, but no formal teaching existed. Observation was their only lesson. Games existed but served survival. Throwing stones was practice for spear throwing. Digging the ground with sticks prepared them to find food. Fights with siblings were training for hunting rival tribes. Every movement had purpose. Every game was a lesson. Fun was a bonus, not the goal. The aim was to learn how to live. In this harsh world, nature was the greatest enemy: cold, hunger, wild beasts. But often, the biggest threat came from other humans. Smoke in the distance sparked worry. Was it fire or a rival tribe? Not all smoke meant warmth. Some meant death. Borders were invisible, mapped only by instinct. A riverbank, cave, or meadow marked territory silently held in hearts. When another tribe crossed these lines, conflict was inevitable. Water sources, fruit trees, hunting grounds, resources were scarce, and peace was rare. Survival demanded vigilance and led to frequent night raids. Even while sleeping, one ear stayed alert. If the fire dimmed, eyes opened. A rustling leaf sent hands to stone weapons. Attacks came silently, before dawn, in the deep sleep when minds were vulnerable. Warriors would creep by the lakeside stones, preparing quietly until the signal to strike. Then chaos erupted: shouts, stones thrown, screams. A few seconds decided fate: fight or flee. Some hid behind shelters, others tried to keep the fire alive. Light was protection. In darkness, every shadow was a threat. Some tribes thrived on aggression, moving constantly and living off others' work. Raids were their way of life: swift, brutal, and merciless. Weapons were primitive but deadly: stones, clubs, bone knives. Attackers subdued or burned what they couldn't carry. Every raid brought trauma, especially to women and children who were most vulnerable. Men fought in front while others escaped, hiding in forests or rivers. Minutes later, attackers left, or an unbearable silence settled. Survivors wandered the ruins the next day: blood on soil, shattered stones, scattered belongings. Life had to start anew, but scars remained deeper than wounds. Fear etched in hearts shaped their existence. Children grew up with this fear, asking before sleep, "Will they come tonight?" Some tribes swore revenge because attacks weren't just about possessions but honor. Defensive systems developed: guards, constant fires, stone walls. Still, attacks often came unexpectedly. Even when leaving the tribe, people stayed alert, watching footprints, reading signs of danger. Sometimes a child noticed a trace and became a hero, but lost their peace of mind. Trauma lingered. Loss was more than physical, it was a spiritual wound. Silent nights found families curled together, shivering not just from cold but fear. Raids shaped tribal culture. Stories of survival were told to inspire courage. Adults shared tales to console themselves, knowing fear couldn't be erased, only transformed. In the Stone Age, rival tribes were not just enemies but harsh teachers. Be ready, stay together, keep the fire alive, keep watch. These were lessons learned through hardship because attacks broke bodies and minds alike. That's why at night people slept close, breathing each other's breath. A change in silence woke everyone. Footsteps echoed in the dark. Time passed: nights, months, seasons. Fire watchers changed, children grew, elders passed quietly. Stories remained not carved in stone but in hearts. Every quiet step, every careful breath, every watchful gaze recalled the past. The greatest lesson: death was certain, but being forgotten wasn't. Leaving a mark didn't require shouting, living quietly was the purest legacy. The Stone Age isn't just history, it's a state of mind. It's living with nature, accepting scarcity, enduring hardships, and standing firm like stone. We talk about them today because of their silence. They never shouted but lived fully. Sometimes living speaks louder than shouting. The fire dims, night grows louder, stories are heard, struggles understood. Thousands of years later, we still ask, what does it truly mean to be strong? Perhaps the Stone Age humans' answer was simple and true: to endure quietly. Thank you for joining this journey back in time. If you enjoy calm, deep explorations of history, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment about which Stone Age challenge you find most difficult. Now, close your eyes and let yourself be carried to the dawn of time, where fire was precious, nights were dark, and survival was a daily miracle. Good night and see you in the next story.